The warning klaxons screamed their death song as Marcus Reed fought desperately with the controls of his cargo hauler, the Wandering Spirit. Red emergency lights bathed the cockpit in hellish illumination while sparks cascaded from blown circuit panels. Through the viewport, the rust-colored surface of Xerion Prime rushed up to meet him with terrifying inevitability. "Come on, you beautiful bastard," Marcus muttered through gritted teeth, his knuckles white as he gripped the stick. "Just give me one more miracle." But the ship had already given everything it had. The fusion drive had failed 3 hours ago, leaving him on emergency thrusters that were now sputtering their last gasps. The navigation computer was dark, the communication array was fried, and life support was functioning on backup power that wouldn't last the night. Marcus had been flying cargo runs through the Outer Rim for 12 years, ever since he'd washed out of the Merchant Marine Academy. He'd survived pirate attacks, solar flares, and more mechanical failures than he cared to count. But this time felt different. This time felt final. The desert floor filled his vision completely now. He could make out individual sand dunes, rocky outcroppings, and the occasional patch of strange purple vegetation that somehow thrived in this wasteland. At least it looked uninhabited. If he was going to die, he'd rather not take anyone else with him. The impact came with surprising gentleness at first, the ship's belly skipping across a flat stretch of sand like a stone across water. Then the nose caught on something solid, and the Wandering Spirit cartwheeled end over end in a symphony of screaming metal and shattering composite. When the world stopped spinning, Marcus found himself hanging upside down in his crash harness, blood trickling from a dozen small cuts. The cockpit was a ruin of twisted metal and sparking electronics, but miraculously, he was alive. The emergency beacon was blinking steadily from what remained of his instrument panel, though he doubted anyone would pick up the signal in this remote sector. He triggered the harness release and dropped heavily to what had once been the ceiling. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he crawled through the wreckage toward the emergency exit. The hatch was jammed, but a few well-placed kicks from his steel-toed boots convinced it to open. The heat hit him like a physical blow. Twin suns blazed overhead in a sky the color of burnished copper, and the temperature had to be pushing 50 degrees Celsius. His flight suit would provide some protection, but not for long. He needed shelter, water, and medical supplies, in that order. The cargo bay had split open like a ripe fruit, scattering containers of rare earth minerals across the desert. Some of them were worth more than most people made in a lifetime, but they might as well have been rocks now. Marcus gathered what survival gear he could find, a half-empty water recycler, emergency rations, a basic medical kit, and his grandfather's plasma pistol. He was loading the supplies into a salvaged equipment pack when he felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. His hand moved instinctively to the pistol's grip as he slowly turned around. At first, he thought the heat was making him hallucinate. The figure standing atop a nearby dune was impossibly tall, easily 10 feet from head to toe. Her skin was a deep violet that seemed to shimmer in the harsh sunlight, and her long white hair flowed behind her like liquid silver. She wore form-fitting armor that looked both primitive and sophisticated, crafted from some kind of metallic material that reflected the desert's colors. But it was her eyes that made his breath catch. They were a brilliant amber, like molten gold, and they regarded him with the cold calculation of a predator sizing up its next meal. She moved down the dune with fluid grace, each step deliberate and silent despite her size. In her right hand, she carried a spear that was nearly as tall as she was, its crystalline tip gleaming wickedly in the sunlight. As she drew closer, Marcus could see more details, the elegant curve of her jaw, the intricate tattoos that spiraled across her arms, the way her armor left strategic areas exposed in a manner that was both practical and undeniably alluring. "Well," Marcus said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded, "this day just keeps getting better." The giantess tilted her head, studying him with those mesmerizing amber eyes. When she spoke, her voice was like distant thunder, melodious but carrying an undertone of barely restrained power. "You speak the common tongue," she said, though her accent was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. "Interesting. Most prey species lack such sophistication." "Prey species?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, though he kept his hand near his weapon. That's a hell of a way to introduce yourself to a crash survivor. I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Reed. Her lips curved in what might have been amusement or anticipation of a good hunt. I am Zephyra Nightshade, huntress of the Crimson Sands clan. And you, small one, are trespassing in sacred territory. Sacred territory? Marcus gestured at the seemingly endless expanse of desert around them. This whole place looks pretty much the same to me. Sand, rocks, more sand. If I'd known it was sacred, I would have crashed somewhere else. That definitely earned him a look of amusement, though it was tinged with something predatory. You have spirit for prey. Most beings your size would be cowering by now. Maybe that's because I'm not prey, Marcus replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm a pilot, a trader, and occasionally a very charming dinner companion. But I've never been anyone's prey. Zephyra moved closer, her spear held casually but ready to strike at a moment's notice. Up close, she was even more imposing. Her violet skin had an almost crystalline quality, and he could see the play of powerful muscles beneath its surface. Despite the obvious danger, Marcus found himself genuinely attracted to her alien beauty. You are injured, she observed, her eyes taking in the blood on his flight suit and the way he favored his left leg. Nothing fatal, Marcus said. Though I won't lie, the accommodations could be better. The twin suns were beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. As if responding to some invisible signal, the temperature began to drop noticeably. Zephyra glanced at the darkening horizon, then back at Marcus. The night brings the cold death on Zirian Prime, she said. And the sand devils emerge to hunt. You will not survive either without shelter. Are you offering to help? Marcus asked. Because I have to say, the whole prey species thing isn't exactly filling me with confidence. For a long moment, they stared at each other in the fading light. Marcus could see something shifting behind those amber eyes, some internal debate he couldn't fathom. Finally, Zephyra made a decision. You intrigue me, small warrior. Most humans who crash on our world are weak, broken things who die quickly. But you. She paused, studying him with renewed interest. You are different. Different how? You show no fear, even facing one who could crush your bones to powder. You make jokes in the face of death. You look at me not as a monster, but as. She seemed to struggle with the concept. As a woman? Marcus suggested gently. The effect of his words was immediate and dramatic. Zephyra's eyes widened slightly, and for just a moment, the predatory mask slipped to reveal something vulnerable underneath. Then it was back, but Marcus had seen enough. Come, she said, turning away abruptly. There is shelter nearby. But know this, Marcus Reed, I save you now only because you amuse me. Do not mistake pragmatism for kindness. As they walked across the cooling desert, Marcus couldn't help but admire the way she moved. Despite her size, Zephyra was graceful as a dancer, her footsteps silent on the sand. The armor she wore seemed to be crafted specifically for her form, highlighting her alien beauty while providing protection. So, he said, breaking the comfortable silence, huntress of the Crimson Sands clan. That sounds impressive. What exactly do you hunt out here? Whatever threatens my people, she replied without looking back. Sand dragons, crystal spiders, storm wraiths. And occasionally, trespassers. Good thing I'm amusing rather than threatening. She glanced back at him, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw a smile. The night is young, small warrior. Do not presume to know what you are to me yet. They reached a rocky outcropping just as the last light faded from the sky. Hidden among the stones was an opening barely large enough for Zephyra to squeeze through. Inside, Marcus found himself in a surprisingly spacious cave illuminated by phosphorescent crystals embedded in the walls. Home sweet home, he asked, looking around at the simple furnishings, sleeping furs, water containers, hunting trophies mounted on the walls. "A way station," Zephyra corrected, setting her spear aside and beginning to remove her armor with casual efficiency. "I maintain several throughout my territory." Marcus tried not to stare as she revealed more of her violet skin, but it was a losing battle. She was magnificent, alien yet undeniably feminine, powerful yet graceful. When she caught him looking, she didn't seem offended. "Your species finds mine attractive?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "This one does," Marcus admitted. "Though I'm probably not typical." "No," she agreed, settling beside him on the soft furs. "You are not typical at all." Outside, the wind was beginning to howl, carrying with it strange sounds that made Marcus grateful for the shelter. Inside the cave, warmth radiated from the crystals, creating an almost intimate atmosphere. "Tell me," Zephyra said, her voice softer now, "what brings a human so far from your territory?" "The nearest human settlement is months away." Marcus found himself telling her about his cargo run, his mechanical troubles, his life as a trader moving goods between the civilized worlds and the frontier settlements. As he talked, he noticed the way she listened, her full attention focused on his words as if they were the most important thing in the universe. A life of constant movement, she mused. Never staying in one place long enough to form lasting bonds. "It sounds lonely." "Sometimes," Marcus admitted. "But also free. I answer to no one but myself, go where I want, when I want. And now you are here, dependent on the mercy of one you called a woman when I am supposed to be a monster." Their eyes met in the crystal light, and Marcus felt something electric pass between them. "You're many things, Zephyra Nightshade. But you're not a monster." "How can you be so certain?" she whispered, leaning closer. "You know nothing of my people, our ways. I could snap your neck before you could draw a breath to scream." "You could," Marcus agreed, not backing away despite the danger radiating from her. "But you won't." "And why is that?" He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently touched her face. Her skin was warm and surprisingly soft, with a texture like the finest silk. "Because beneath all that armor and attitude, you're just as curious about me as I am about you." For a heartbeat, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. Then she pulled back, but not before he saw the longing there. "You are dangerous, Marcus Reed," she said quietly. "More dangerous than any sand dragon. Because I see you as a person instead of a monster. Because you make me want things I cannot have." The words hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and pain. Outside, the desert night was alive with alien sounds, but inside their crystal-lit sanctuary, two beings from different worlds had found something neither had expected, a connection that transcended species, size, and circumstance. As the night deepened, they continued to talk, sharing stories of their worlds, their dreams, their fears. And with each word, each glance, each accidental touch, the impossible attraction between them grew stronger. Neither could have known that this chance encounter would set in motion events that would change not just their lives, but the relationship between their peoples forever. Dawn broke across Zirian Prime with the violence of twin suns igniting the horizon. Marcus woke to find himself alone on the soft furs, the cave already warming despite the early hour. The phosphorescent crystals had dimmed with the rising light, and through the cave entrance, he could see Zephyra silhouetted against the brilliant sky. She stood motionless as a statue, her spear planted in the sand beside her, violet skin gleaming like polished amethyst in the morning light. Her white hair flowed freely now, unbound by the practical constraints of her armor. She looked like some ancient goddess surveying her domain, beautiful and terrible and utterly alien. "Good morning," Marcus said, stretching muscles that protested from sleeping on unfamiliar ground. "Enjoying the sunrise?" Reading the signs, Zephyra replied without turning. "The sand tells stories to those who know how to listen." Marcus joined her at the cave entrance, immediately grateful for the shade. Even in the early morning, the heat was building toward the punishing temperatures of full day. "What kind of stories?" She pointed toward a series of ripples in the sand, barely visible to his untrained eye. Sand dragons passed this way in the night. 3 of them, heading toward the deep desert. And there. She indicated another set of marks. Crystal spiders, hunting in pack formation. Should we be worried? Zephyra finally looked at him, and Marcus was struck again by the intensity of those amber eyes. Everything on Zirian Prime should be worried when crystal spiders hunt in packs. But they are moving away from our path. Our path? You cannot remain here, she said matter-of-factly. This shelter is temporary. If you wish to survive until rescue comes, you need the resources of my sanctuary. Marcus felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. You're taking me with you. I am ensuring you do not die stupidly and alone in the desert, Zephyr corrected, though her tone lacked its previous edge. My honor would be stained if I allowed such waste. They prepared to leave as the suns climbed higher, Zephyr checking her weapons and water supplies with practiced efficiency. Marcus gathered his salvaged gear, trying not to think about how inadequate it all seemed in this harsh environment. Stay close, Zephyr instructed as they set out across the sand. And step where I step. The desert has many hidden dangers. The first few hours passed in relative silence, Marcus struggling to match Zephyr's ground-eating pace while she moved with the effortless grace of someone born to this world. Despite her longer stride, she occasionally slowed to allow him to catch up, though she always made it seem casual rather than accommodating. It was when they stopped for water that Marcus first heard the hunting cry. The sound echoed across the dunes like the shriek of tearing metal mixed with the howl of wind through broken glass. Zephyra went rigid, her hand moving to her spear. What was that? Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. Razor hawk, Zephyra said grimly. And it has caught our scent. The creature that crested the distant dune looked like someone's nightmare-given form and wings. Its body was sleek and predatory, covered in what appeared to be metallic scales that reflected the harsh sunlight. Its wingspan had to be at least 20 feet, and as it turned toward them, Marcus could see rows of crystalline teeth gleaming in its opened beak. How fast can you run, small warrior? Zephyra asked, already moving. Fast enough, Marcus replied, though he doubted it was true. They ran across the shifting sand, Zephyr's longer legs eating up the distance while Marcus pushed himself to his limits. Behind them, the razor hawk's hunting cry grew closer, and Marcus could hear the whistle of air through its wings. There. Zephyra pointed toward a cluster of rocky spires rising from the desert floor. If we can reach the stone maze, it will not be able to follow. Marcus poured on every ounce of speed he possessed, his lungs burning in the dry air. The rocky spires seemed impossibly far away, while the razor hawk's shadow was already passing over them. He could feel the wind from its wings, smell the metallic scent of its scales. That's when his foot found the hidden sinkhole. One moment he was running, the next he was falling into what felt like a pit of loose sand and broken stone. He hit the bottom hard, pain shooting through his already injured leg. Above him, he could hear Zephyr's voice raised in what sounded like a battle cry. When he managed to pull himself up to the edge of the sinkhole, Marcus saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Zephyra stood her ground as the razor hawk dove toward her, her spear held ready. At the last possible moment, she sidestepped with liquid grace and thrust upward, the crystalline point of her weapon finding the soft spot beneath the creature's wing. The razor hawk screamed in pain and fury, its talons raking across Zephyra's armor and drawing lines of violet blood. But her aim was true, and the creature crashed to the sand in a tangle of metallic scales and tattered wings. Impressive, Marcus called out as he hauled himself from the pit. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Zephyra pulled her spear free from the razor hawk's corpse, wiping the blue blood from its crystalline tip. Your species is more fragile than I realized, she said, but her eyes were checking him for injuries. Are you damaged? Just my pride, Marcus admitted, though his leg was throbbing. That was incredible. I've never seen anyone move like that. Something shifted in her expression, a softening that made her look almost vulnerable. My people begin hunt training before we can walk properly. It is necessary for survival. And here I thought you were just showing off for me. That earned him one of her rare smiles, and Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. When Zephyra smiled, her entire face transformed from coldly beautiful to radiant. They reached the stone maze as the suns reached their zenith, the heat becoming almost unbearable. The rocky spires provided blessed shade and a winding path that would confuse any aerial predators. As they moved deeper into the maze, Marcus began to notice signs of deliberate arrangement. Someone built this, he observed, running his hand along a wall that showed clear tool marks. My ancestors, Zephyra confirmed. When the first generation came to Xerion Prime, they needed defenses against the native predators. This maze extends for miles underground, with hidden chambers and escape routes. And your people just abandoned it? Not abandoned. We evolved beyond the need for hiding. She paused at an intersection, consulting markings carved into the stone. Though sometimes the old ways prove their worth. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber that took Marcus's breath away. Phosphorescent crystals covered the walls and ceiling like stars, their light reflecting off the surface of an underground lake that seemed to stretch into infinity. Strange plants grew along the water's edge, their leaves glowing with bioluminescent patterns. Welcome to the Sanctuary of Whispers, Zephyra said, her voice filled with quiet pride. One of the sacred places of my people. Marcus stared in wonder at the alien beauty surrounding them. The air was cool and sweet, filled with the sound of gently moving water and the soft chiming of crystal formations. It's incredible. How many of these places exist? Fewer each year, Zephyra replied, and there was sadness in her voice. The younger generation sees them as relics, preferring the cities and their technological wonders. But places like this remember what we were, what we can be. They made camp beside the lake, and as the day's heat gave way to the cool of evening, Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time since the crash. Zephyra had shed her armor again, and in the soft crystal light, she looked less like a fearsome huntress and more like a woman enjoying a moment of peace. Tell me about your world, she said as they shared a meal of dried meat and strange fruits she'd gathered. What is Earth like? Marcus found himself describing blue skies and green forests, oceans that stretched beyond the horizon, cities that reached toward the stars. As he talked, he noticed how intently Zephyra listened, her amber eyes never leaving his face. It sounds beautiful, she said when he finished. But also crowded. How do you find solitude in such a place? Sometimes you don't, Marcus admitted. That's part of why I became a trader. Space is the ultimate solitude. And yet you seem to prefer company. There was something in her tone that made him look at her more carefully. In the crystal light, her violet skin seemed to glow from within, and her hair fell around her shoulders like liquid starlight. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Depends on the company, he said quietly. She moved closer, ostensibly to refill his water container, but Marcus caught the subtle scent of her skin, something like exotic flowers and desert wind. When their hands brushed as she handed him the container, he felt that same electric current from the night before. Your people, Zephyra said, settling beside him on the soft sand, do they form permanent bonds? Some do. Marriage, family, that sort of thing. Others prefer to keep their options open. And you? Marcus considered the question, aware that his answer might matter more than simple curiosity. I always thought I was the second type. Never stayed anywhere long enough to form serious attachments. But lately. He looked at her, meeting those mesmerizing amber eyes. Lately I'm wondering if I just never met the right person. The silence that followed was charged with possibility. Zephyra's gaze moved from his eyes to his lips and back again, and Marcus felt his breath catch. This is unwise, she whispered, but she didn't move away. Probably, Marcus agreed, reaching out to brush a strand of white hair from her face. But I'm getting the feeling that wisdom is overrated. When she leaned into his touch this time, she didn't pull away. Her skin was warm and incredibly soft, and Marcus could feel the steady rhythm of her pulse beneath his fingertips. My people would not understand, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Mine probably wouldn't either, Marcus replied. Good thing they're not here. She laughed softly, the sound echoing off the crystal walls like music. You are nothing like what I expected when I first saw your crashed ship. What did you expect? Another weak human who would die quickly in our desert. Instead, I find someone who makes jokes in the face of death, who runs toward danger instead of away from it, who looks at me and sees. She paused, struggling with the words. Someone worth saving. Someone worth knowing, she corrected, and the simple honesty in her voice made Marcus's heart race. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Marcus learned that Zephyra had been trained as a huntress from birth, that she'd never known her father, that she sometimes felt isolated from her own people by her duties and expectations. In return, he told her about growing up on a space station, about losing his parents in a transport accident, about the loneliness of life among the stars. As the hours passed, the physical distance between them gradually decreased until they were sitting close enough to feel each other's warmth. I should not want this, Zephyra murmured, her head resting against his shoulder. Despite their size difference, they fit together surprisingly well. Want what? Marcus asked, though he thought he knew. You. This. The impossible dream of connection across the void between our worlds. Marcus tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. Maybe impossible dreams are the only ones worth having. When she kissed him, it was soft and tentative at first, as if she were afraid of breaking something precious. But when Marcus responded with equal gentleness, the kiss deepened, becoming something that spoke of longing held too long in check. They broke apart breathless, and Zephyra rested her forehead against his. What are we doing, Marcus Reed? Something crazy, he admitted. Something wonderful. Something that probably won't end well. And yet you continue? Wouldn't miss it for the world. She laughed again, and this time there was joy in the sound rather than just amusement. They spent the rest of the night talking and kissing and discovering the strange chemistry that seemed to exist between them despite every logical reason it shouldn't. As dawn approached and the crystal light began to dim, Marcus realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. He was falling in love with an alien huntress who could literally crush him without effort, whose people would probably consider him an abomination, and who lived in a world where everything wanted to kill him. It was, he decided, the best bad idea he'd ever had. But as they prepared to continue their journey toward Zephyra's home territory, neither of them could have imagined the challenges that lay ahead. The desert had tested their ability to survive together, but soon they would face something far more dangerous than razor hawks or crystal spiders. They would face the judgment of Zephyra's people, and the ancient laws that governed who could love whom among the stars. The crimson sand settlement rose from the desert like a mirage made manifest. Carved into the living rock of a massive plateau, the dwellings seemed to grow organically from the stone itself, their crystalline windows catching the light of the twin suns and casting rainbow patterns across the sand below. Graceful spires reached toward the sky, connected by delicate bridges that defied human understanding of architecture. Marcus stood beside Zephyra on the final ridge before the settlement, awed by the alien beauty spread before them. Hundreds of Zirions moved through the carved streets and terraced gardens, their violet and blue-tinted skin creating a living tapestry of color against the red stone. It's magnificent, he breathed, watching the way the settlement seemed to pulse with life and energy. Home, Zephyra said simply, but there was tension in her voice that hadn't been there during their journey. Though I confess, I am uncertain how to present you to my people. Marcus glanced at her, noting the way she'd grown more reserved as they'd approached her homeland. The easy intimacy of the past few days had given way to something more guarded, more careful. As a crash survivor in need of help, he suggested. That would be the simplest explanation, she agreed, but her amber eyes were troubled. Though simple and truthful are not always the same thing. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, a hunting party emerged from a hidden canyon below them. 5 Zirions mounted on creatures that looked like a cross between horses and lizards, their scales gleaming in the sunlight. They moved with the fluid grace Marcus had come to associate with Zephyr's people, but there was something different about their approach, a wariness that spoke of patrol rather than welcome. Zephyr Nightshade, called the lead rider as they approached. He was perhaps the largest Xerian Marcus had yet seen, standing nearly 11 feet tall with skin the color of polished obsidian. Intricate silver tattoos covered his arms and chest, and his white hair was braided with metal ornaments that chimed softly as he moved. "You return with interesting company." "Vex Shadowclaw," Zephyr replied, and Marcus caught the subtle shift in her posture, straighter, more formal. "I present Marcus Reed, survivor of a cargo ship crash. I have granted him sanctuary under the ancient laws." Vex's eyes, a pale blue unlike Zephyr's warm amber, studied Marcus with unconcealed disdain. "A human. How, curious. It has been many seasons since one of their kind dared enter our territory." "He did not dare," Zephyr corrected sharply. "His ship failed, and he crashed in the deep desert. Without aid, he would have died." "Perhaps that would have been preferable," Vex said, dismounting from his scaled steed with predatory grace. "Humans are weak creatures, prone to disease and deception. They bring nothing but trouble to those foolish enough to shelter them." Marcus felt his temper flare at the casual dismissal, but before he could respond, Zephyr stepped between them. "The sanctuary laws are clear, Vex. All who seek aid in the desert shall receive it, regardless of species." "The sanctuary laws," Vex repeated, his tone suggesting he found them antiquated. "Yes, of course. How could I forget your devotion to the old ways?" His gaze moved between Zephyr and Marcus, and something calculating entered his expression. "Though I wonder what the Council of Elders will make of your dedication to this particular rescue." The journey into the settlement was a parade of stares and whispers. Xerions emerged from their dwellings to gawk at the strange sight of a human walking among them, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Children with skin like precious gems peered from behind their parents, their large eyes wide with wonder. "They're not exactly rolling out the welcome mat," Marcus observed, trying to keep his voice light despite the growing tension. "My people have little experience with humans," Zephyr replied, though he noticed she stayed close to his side. "And what experience they have has not been favorable." "Meaning?" "Meaning the last humans who came to Xerian Prime were not crashed pilots in need of rescue," Vex interjected from behind them. "They were prospectors, seeking to strip mine our sacred crystal formations. We were forced to drive them away with considerable violence." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert evening. "How long ago was this?" 3 seasons past, Vex said, his tone suggesting it might as well have been yesterday. "Long enough for the wounded to heal, not long enough for the memory to fade." They were escorted to the settlement's heart, where a great amphitheater had been carved into the living rock. Here, the Council of Elders held court, their ancient forms draped in robes that seemed to be woven from crystalline threads. At their center sat a figure who could only be the clan leader, a female Xerian whose skin had taken on the deep purple of great age, her white hair flowing like liquid silver to pool around her feet. "Elder Crimson," Zephyr said, bowing deeply. "I present Marcus Reed of Earth, whom I found dying in the deep desert. I have granted him sanctuary under the ancient laws." Elder Crimson's eyes, so pale they were almost white, studied Marcus with the weight of centuries. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of absolute command. "Marcus Reed of Earth," she said, and somehow she made his name sound like both a question and an accusation. "You are far from your people's territory. What brings you to our world?" Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware of every eye upon him. "Mechanical failure, Elder Crimson. My cargo ship suffered a cascade failure, and Xerian Prime was the only planet within range. I had no choice but to attempt an emergency landing." "And what cargo did you carry?" Vex interjected. "More mining equipment. Prospecting tools. Rare earth minerals," Marcus replied honestly. "Nothing that would interest your people, I imagine. The cargo was bound for the Centauri colonies." "Minerals," Elder Crimson mused. And yet you survived where others have perished. The deep desert shows no mercy to the weak or unprepared. I had help, Marcus said, glancing at Zephyra. Your huntress saved my life. Indeed. The elder's gaze moved to Zephyra, and Marcus caught something in her expression that made his stomach tighten. And how did you find this human, Zephyra Nightshade? What drew you to his location? I was patrolling the sacred boundaries when I detected the crash signature, Zephyra replied, but Marcus noticed a slight hesitation in her voice. It is my duty to investigate all disturbances in the deep desert. Your duty, Elder Crimson repeated. Yes. And having found him, you chose to grant sanctuary rather than allow the desert to claim another trespasser. An interesting decision. The way she said it made it sound like anything but a compliment. Marcus was beginning to understand that there were undercurrents to this conversation he couldn't fully grasp. The sanctuary laws, Zephyr began. Are ancient and rarely invoked, Vex interrupted. Especially for humans. One might wonder why you felt compelled to honor them in this case. Because all life has value, Zephyra said firmly. Even human life. A murmur ran through the assembled Zirions, and Marcus realized that Zephyra had just said something controversial. The looks directed at her were no longer simply curious, they were disapproving, almost scandalized. All life has value, Elder Crimson repeated slowly. An admirable sentiment, though one that some might consider naive. Tell me, Zephyra Nightshade, in the days you have spent with this human, have you maintained proper distance? Observed the protocols for dealing with alien species? Marcus felt his heart sink as he recognized the trap being laid. Zephyra's slight hesitation before answering told him she recognized it too. I have ensured his survival, she said carefully. As honor demanded. That is not what I asked. Elder Crimson's voice carried the crack of authority. I asked whether you maintained proper distance. Whether you remembered that humans are not our kind, and should not be treated as such. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, could sense the collective held breath of the assembly. Beside him, Zephyra stood frozen, trapped between honesty and diplomacy. I see, Elder Crimson said finally. Your silence speaks volumes, young huntress. With respect, Elder, Marcus said, stepping forward, Zephyra has acted with nothing but honor. She saved my life, shared her food and water, protected me from the dangers of your world. If there's been any impropriety, it was on my part, not hers. Impropriety, Vex said, and there was something like satisfaction in his voice. An interesting choice of words. What kind of impropriety might there be between a Zirian huntress and a human castaway? Marcus realized he'd walked into another trap, but before he could respond, Zephyr spoke. I have violated no laws, she said, her voice ringing clearly through the amphitheater. I granted sanctuary to one in need, as is my right and duty as a huntress of the Crimson Sands. But you have formed an attachment, Elder Crimson observed. It is written in your posture, in the way you stand close to him, in the careful distance you maintain between truth and falsehood. You care for this human in ways that go beyond duty. The accusation hung in the air like a physical thing. Marcus felt the crowd's mood shift from curiosity to something darker, more dangerous. He could see the calculation in Vex's eyes, the satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey. Is this true? Elder Crimson demanded. Have you allowed yourself to form emotional bonds with this alien? Zephyra's jaw tightened, and Marcus could see the war playing out in her expression. He wanted to spare her this, to find some way to deflect the blame onto himself, but he knew that would only make things worse. I have come to respect Marcus Reed as an individual, she said finally. He has shown courage, intelligence, and honor. These are qualities my people value, regardless of species. Respect, Vex scoffed. Is that what you call it? The way you look at him, the way you protected him from the Razor Hawk, the way you brought him to the Sanctuary of Whispers, places forbidden to outsiders. This is respect. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. How could Vex possibly know about the sanctuary? Unless. You followed us, he said, understanding flooding through him. You've been watching us since we left the crash site. Vex's smile was cold and predatory. It is my duty to ensure the safety of our territory. When I heard that Zephyra had found a human, I took it upon myself to observe from a distance. What I saw was most illuminating. You spied on us, Zephyra said, her voice tight with controlled fury. You violated the ancient codes of privacy and honor. I protected our people from potential contamination, Vex shot back. And what I found justified my concerns. You have allowed this human to touch sacred places, to see the hidden ways of our ancestors. Worse, you have allowed him to touch you. The gasp that ran through the assembly was audible. Marcus felt sick as he realized the full scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just about sanctuary laws or cultural protocols, this was about something far more fundamental. The touching taboo, Elder Crimson said, her voice heavy with disappointment. One of our most ancient laws. Xerions do not engage in physical intimacy with alien species. The risk of disease, of genetic contamination, of cultural pollution, these laws exist for our protection. I am not diseased, Marcus said, his temper finally overriding his diplomacy. And I'm not trying to contaminate anyone. I'm a shipwrecked pilot who found someone willing to help him survive. Someone, Vex said mockingly. How casually you speak of a huntress of the Crimson Sands, as if she were merely someone rather than a guardian of our sacred ways. She is someone, Marcus replied firmly. Someone brave, compassionate, and intelligent. Someone who saw past species differences to the person underneath. If that's contamination, then maybe your people need more of it. The silence that followed his words was absolute. Marcus realized he'd just insulted an entire civilization to their faces, but he was past caring. The way they were treating Zephyra, the casual dismissal of her agency and choices, made his blood boil. Elder Crimson rose from her seat, her ancient form seeming to grow larger and more imposing. You dare to suggest that our ways are lacking? That our laws and traditions should be set aside for the convenience of an alien trespasser? I'm suggesting that maybe laws that prevent good people from caring about each other aren't worth following, Marcus shot back. Zephyra saved my life, showed me kindness when she could have left me to die. If your society punishes that kind of compassion, then yes, I think your ways are lacking. The roar of outrage from the assembled Xerions was deafening. Marcus found himself surrounded by towering alien forms, their amber and gold eyes blazing with fury. For a moment, he thought they might tear him apart with their bare hands. Then Zephyra stepped between him and the crowd, her spear held ready. Enough, she shouted, her voice carrying over the tumult. This human speaks under my protection. Any who would harm him must first face me. And so the contamination reveals itself, Vex said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. She chooses the alien over her own people. She threatens violence against her clanmates for the sake of a human. I choose honor over prejudice, Zephyr replied, but Marcus could hear the pain in her voice. I choose compassion over fear. Elder Crimson raised her hand, and silence fell like a curtain. Zephyra Nightshade, she said formally, you stand accused of violating the touching taboo, of bringing an alien to sacred places, and of placing foreign interests above those of your clan. How do you answer these charges? Zephyra straightened, and Marcus saw her transform into the regal huntress he'd first encountered in the desert. I answer that I have acted with honor in all things. I granted sanctuary to one in need, I protected the weak from the strong, and I showed compassion to a stranger. If these are crimes, then I am guilty as charged. And do you renounce this alien? Elder Crimson demanded. Do you cast him out and return to the proper ways of our people? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus held his breath, knowing that everything depended on Zephyra's answer. She could save herself, could claim that she'd been temporarily confused or influenced by alien pheromones. She could cast him out and return to her people's good graces. Instead, she looked at him with those magnificent amber eyes, and he saw her decision written there. "I renounce nothing," she said clearly. "Marcus Reed has shown me that connection transcends species, that love recognizes no boundaries drawn by fear or tradition. I will not abandon him to preserve laws that value isolation over understanding." The word love hit the assembly like a physical blow. Even Marcus felt stunned by her bold declaration, by the courage it took to stand before her entire people and choose him over everything she'd ever known. "Then you are no longer welcome among the Crimson Sands," Elder Crimson said, her voice heavy with finality. "Exile is the penalty for those who choose alien ways over Xerian honor. You have until dawn to gather your belongings and depart our territory. Neither you nor your alien companion may ever return." "No," Marcus said, stepping forward. "You can't do this. She saved my life, she doesn't deserve to be punished for that." The choice was hers, Vex said with obvious satisfaction. "She could have maintained proper distance, could have honored our ways. Instead, she chose contamination and exile." "Then I'll leave," Marcus said desperately. "My emergency beacon is still broadcasting. When rescue comes, I'll go with them. Zephyra doesn't have to give up everything for me." "Too late," Elder Crimson replied. "The contamination has already occurred. She has been touched by alien influence, has allowed foreign ideas to corrupt her judgment. She can never again be trusted to uphold Xerian values." Marcus felt the weight of guilt crushing down on him. By accepting Zephyra's help, by allowing their relationship to develop, he destroyed her life. She would lose her home, her people, her entire identity because of him. But when he looked at her, expecting to see regret or accusation, he saw only fierce pride and unshakable determination. "I choose my own path," Zephyra said, taking his hand in full view of the assembly. "And I choose to walk it with Marcus Reed." As they were escorted from the amphitheater under heavy guard, Marcus realized that their greatest challenges were only beginning. They were now outcasts from Zephyra's people, stranded on a hostile world with no way to call for help. But they had each other, and for the first time in his life, Marcus understood that some things were worth any sacrifice. Even if that sacrifice was everything they'd ever known.